Peter Bruckner, welcome to Roll with the Punches.
Thank you for having me.
Just tell me the percentage of people that pronounce your name right first up.
About 10%,
I feel
it's
pretty
always,
elite right now.
yeah, it's always a bit of a shock when they either pronounce it right or spell it right. But that's a problem with being of Austrian heritage. And anyway.
Yeah, wow. Were you born here or you?
I was born here, yeah, but my dad was born in Austria, came out just at the start of the war as sort of refugees. And I'm a born and bred Aussie.
Beautiful.
Think he died. Yep.
Well, I was just having a bit of a look. I was just having a bit of a stalk on you, as I do. And
Oh,
you're
dear.
an amazing human. And I can safely say, without any word of exaggeration on this, that you officially have the most letters I have ever seen on someone's name ever. Now, I've written them down, and I nearly ran out of ink because I wanted to read them. Ready?
Yeah.
Peter Bruckner. OAM. MBBS. FACSP. FACSM. FASMF. FFSEM. I can safely say I have no idea what that means aside from the first one, OAM, but I am suitably impressed.
I just made them all up. It's all just, yeah. It's full. Yeah, someone else I'm fooled. There you go. See?
I love it. Well, you are a specialist sports and exercise physician. You're a founding partner of the Olympic Park Sports Medicine Centre, which all of the Melbourneites, Victorians, and probably a lot of the Australians will definitely be familiar with that establishment, and a world-renowned sports medicine clinician and researcher.
Oh, I don't know about world-renowned, but anyway, I don't know.
Well, the internet says it, so it's definitely right.
Must be right, then. Must be right. Who am I to argue?
And you're on this podcast now, so you're definitely world-renowned.
Well, now I am world-renowned. That's exactly right.
So you're welcome. You're welcome, Peter.
I'm very excited. Okay, thanks.
Hey, what got you into it all? Where did this fascination start?
Look, for some reason that I don't really understand, I've always had a passion for sport. Like as a kid, sport was, I couldn't wait to get home from school and, play cricket and footy. And, I'd spend all my time either playing sport or watching sport or reading about sport and so on. I'd always sort of turn to the back page of the paper first and read the sport and so on. In fact, I always remember thinking as a kid, I'll know when I'd finally grown up is when I start reading the front page before the back page. But hasn't happened yet, so we'll see how we go.
Keeping young by the order you read your paper.
Well, you've got to have a quick look at the front page because if there's a really big story, particularly in Melbourne and footy, it'll be on the front page. But then you go straight to the back. But,
I love that. So were you a bit of an athlete yourself?
I heard a quote just on the front page thing while I would think of it. I heard a quote once saying that some very eminent person agreed with my philosophy at the back page. I said the back page is full of men's triumphs and the front page is full of man's disasters. So I thought, yeah, that's probably not a bad
It's so true. And how backwards is that? How backwards is that?
Exactly. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. Were you an athlete as a kid?
Oh, look, I played a lot of sport. I was okay, at a sort of local and school level. Loved it. Cricket, footy, tennis, swimming, you name it. I tried it and I was okay. I played a lot of cricket, a lot of footy mainly. In those days, we're talking, 50s and 60s, that was it. In the summer you played cricket, in the winter you played footy. No one played soccer or basketball or, anything like that. It was just footy and cricket and I loved them. That was my life. It was terrific.
Yeah. And did you always have that interest to go into the space of sports medicine and...
Well, yeah, look, what I really wanted to do when I finished school was to be a sports commentator. But I figured, I wanted, just as well I didn't because, Bruce McAvaney would have been out of a job really, but because I'd have taken over. But my mother convinced me that probably wasn't a proper career for a young man. So she convinced me to go into medicine. So I finished up being a doctor. And I guess I continued my passion for sport during that time. And it was probably inevitable, I suppose, that I would go into sports medicine. So I did my normal medical training and then you do, a few years in the hospitals. I did most of that in England. Went over to England because I could watch more sport over there, and
not at all sport obsessed.
Not at all. No, and then came back to Australia, and it was just about the time when sports medicine was just sort of starting, really. There weren't really any sports medicine clinics around that time or people doing full-time sports medicine. So I started off doing a combination of general practice and sports medicine. But then after a little while, I decided, well, I'll take the plunge, and I thought I'd try full-time sports medicine for 6 months, and that was 35 years ago or something, or 30 years ago, and I'm still going. So it worked out. So it was fortunate timing, really. I guess I was just coming through at a time where sports medicine was taking off, because up till then, basically, it was just people with an interest in sports medicine. Anyone who'd been to a football match at some stage would stick a shingle up saying sports medicine expert, and expect people to come and so on. And so a group of us got together and decided to try and form a group, a college, regulate, form an education program, a training program for those people who wanted to do sports medicine. And that's what we set up, a college of sports physicians. And eventually, after a long haul, about 15 years later, we got recognised as a fully fledged medical specialty. So we're one of the first new specialties in Australia, and one of the few places in the world that have sports medicine as a specialty. But that was a lot of bash your head against a brick wall and hang around the corridors of Parliament House in Canberra trying to talk to politicians and other people, trying to convince them that sports medicine was real and deserving of specialty status.
How incredible. Now all those letters are starting to fall into place now. They're all starting to make sense. How much does sports medicine differ from, what are the fundamental differences? What did you have to move away from in typical medicine?
Well, I think one classic example, I guess, is that, the average sort of GP you go to, if you had an injury, the first thing you'd say would be rest, stop doing what you're doing. Whereas our whole philosophy is, let's keep going. Let's get you back to doing what you want to do as quickly as possible. In the meantime, do this, and this to keep you active and fit and so on. So that was a sort of a major philosophical difference, I suppose. One of the things that no branch of medicine was really interested in the sort of orthopedic injuries that didn't need surgery. So, things like back pain and sprained ankles and shin splints and groin pain and things like that, they sort of fell between the cracks because the orthopedic surgeons weren't interested because it wasn't a surgical thing. And the GPs, there wasn't sort of really in their sort of area of expertise. So that's really the gap that we filled. Really was that non-surgical, orthopedic and sports injuries. And then over a period of time, it sort of expanded into exercise medicine as well as sports medicine, and people started to understand the benefits of exercise. And again, we were the experts in exercise. So I think, now a lot of what we do is prescribe exercise for people with chronic disease, for instance, and so on. So it's really broadened over the whole sort of 30 odd years or so.
I love that. But what bugs me about it is how there is that barrier between typical medicine and sports medicine. And, I love the philosophy of sports medicine professionals, but even as someone who was an athlete for such a long time, not such a long time anyway, really, I wasn't didn't even do anything athletics. I was 29, Peter, so that was a bold statement. But for someone whose mindset was that of an athlete, and when I would seek out treatment for things, even with the circle that was around me, I wasn't a professional athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but to find someone to treat an athlete was very difficult, and I didn't understand the difference between sports medicine and medicine. So in my mind, I would get answers I didn't want that didn't help me from medicine, and it was like, well, I'm not going to go seek any medical advice on that because I don't like the medical advice. I remember one of the first physicians that I loved and who I go to now if I've got any of those quirky little athlete issues. My chiropractor, Christian Varney, referred me to Brett Yaros, and he's in South Yarra, and I just think he's a wizard, right? And I remember because the first thing I was boxing and I had something going on with my arm, and I'm just used to doctors or anyone saying, you got to rest or you got to this or you got to that. And he said, you'll have a level 6 pain, I can't remember. You'll have a level 6 pain and that's okay, and you'll have that for this long, but you have to do this. But if it goes any higher than that, so I was like, this is the first guy that's never told me that I have to not have the pain. He's given me the exact expectation of what pain is okay, and he's not stopping me from, because he knows I'm not going to listen anyway if he's going to tell me to stop. So he's giving me the boundaries that I need as an athlete.
Yeah, pain is okay. Yeah, it's not, as you say, not too much and not increasing and so on. But like it's a different philosophy, and I think that one of the good things that's happened is that sort of some of the breakthroughs that we've made in the management of elite sport athletes, have now filtered through to the everyday, person on the street who is active and might, sprain their ankle walking the dog, or likes to jog or play tennis or whatever. And so, the advances that have been made in the management of the elite have really, I think, filtered down very well to the general community, which has been, very beneficial. Most of the people we see, people have this image that, as a sports physician, in your practice, you see all these superstar athletes. And so, well, there's not enough superstar athletes around to keep you to make a living out of, I can assure you. So, so the vast majority of people that we see in a sports medicine clinic are, people like yourself, people who like to exercise, like to play their community sport, might play local cricket or footy or local tennis club, or just enjoy exercising. So they're and they want it. And interestingly enough, they want to get better just as much as the person who's being paid, $50,000 a year to play or whatever. So, because it's really important to them, and that's, I think, one of the philosophical things that at least we understand how important sport and exercise is to people, particularly in these COVID times and so on. It's really brought it home, I think, how important people's sport, both from a mental and a physical viewpoint. So, we realise that people are desperate to get it back. That you might be playing, F grade amateur football, but you're as passionate about it as if you're playing in the AFL. It's just as important to you in your life. So we want to give those sort of people just as much opportunity to play as the professionals. So that's a really important part of our philosophy.
And I think it is so important to enable that, because if we let people have to accept their situation and just become stagnant, then they're going to end up in the hospital system anyway, because the disease is going to start to kick in because they're not moving and they're not kind of living their bloody purpose.
Yep.
If I had to sit still for too long, mate, I think I'd wind up in a padded cell.
Yeah.
Do you think it's do you think that the bullishness of the mindsets of athletes helped propel the way that you treated, because they wouldn't stop, they wouldn't rest? Did that help push?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, forwards? Yeah, and they're demanding, and then they want answers and they want solutions, and it was our job to find those answers and find those solutions, and and find ways of getting people back to sport, a lot quicker than they would have otherwise. So, yeah, that was that's been a huge challenge right through my career and the whole profession. And we haven't we're not perfect by any means, but otherwise everyone would be back playing the next week. But I think generally, we've pushed the barriers and we've found out where those, how far you can push people, and we have that knowledge now that we can adapt to other people.
Yeah. Over your time, is there one or two things that you've taught for a very long time and then had to completely renege on and change your philosophy on? And what are those things?
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them,
And when you come across your first big one, how hard was that for you to process and deal with for the first time?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important that you continually have to keep an open mind on things. I think that's something that our profession's probably not very good at. We tend to sort of believe everything we were taught in medical school and then, live it for the rest of our lives and so on. And I heard a great expression once. Someone said that, 50% of everything you learn in medical school turns out to be wrong. You just have to work out which 50%, So, I think we have to always acknowledge that. The big area, I guess, that I've really sort of changed my philosophy, and it's become, the most important part of my practice really the last 10 years has been nutrition. In that, I grew up in that era where we were told that, fat was bad and cholesterol was bad, and that we had to, avoid fat at any cost. So we went, low fat this and low fat that, and margarine instead of butter, and low fat skim milk instead of milk, and all no eggs, and all that, trim the fat off all your meat and so on. And I guess that really changed for me. I was it's about 10 years ago. I was actually in Liverpool. I did a few years at the Liverpool Football Club there, and I was at the time. If you'd asked me, was I healthy? How was I feeling? I would have said, yeah, fine. Good. I'm eat the right diet and exercise and so on. The reality was that I wasn't quite as healthy probably as I thought I was, in that I had a family history of type 2 diabetes. My father had developed type 2 diabetes at exactly my age. I was obese. I'd probably put on, like many middle-aged men, sort of half a kilogram a year for 30 years, and the kids are sort of poking me in the guts and saying, come on, Dad, how about it? And I'd shrug my shoulders and say, well, hang on, I'm on the right diet and exercise and all that sort of stuff. But I was significantly overweight, and I had a number of other metabolic issues. I had a fatty liver. I had high insulin levels, high triglyceride levels. So I was clearly, in retrospect, pre-diabetic, but I didn't realise it at the time. And then I heard around that time a colleague of mine in South Africa, Tim Noakes, had sort of come out and said that, no, he thought that the whole fat thing was wrong, and that it was actually carbohydrates that were the problem. And it was pretty controversial. And initially I thought, we couldn't possibly be. That couldn't possibly be right. We couldn't possibly have all been wrong for 30 or 40 years. The whole of Western society has been on a low-fat diet, and this guy, is coming along and saying, it's a load of rubbish. Tim, come on, And, but Tim was an old friend of mine, a very smart guy, and he'd been right a couple of other times when he challenged medical orthodoxies or sports science orthodoxies. So I thought, no, I need to look into this. So I dived into it, and I read a book. It's called Good Calories, Bad Calories by a guy called Gary Taubes. And this book just blew me away, because it talked about not only that, the relative merits of fats and carbs, and clearly, that they weren't quite as we'd been taught, but talked about the politics of how the low fat movement had won out over the low carb movement, back in the 60s and 70s, which I always assumed was due to good science and evidence and all that sort of stuff.
God.
Turns out to be all about money and politics and power and so on, and nothing to do with science. And that really disturbed me. I mean, I remember putting this book down at night thinking, nah, this couldn't be right. The more I read, so then I dived into everything, and I just, the more I read, the more I thought, my God, we've got this totally wrong. So I thought, okay, I'll try it out on myself. So I decided I'd have a 3-month trial of changing my diet to this, new sort of low carb, sort of healthy fat diet that people were talking about. And so on day one, I jumped on the scales and I got my bloods done, and sure enough, there they were, fatty liver and high this and high that. And I went on to this low carb diet. So I stopped eating, all sugar, all starches. I stopped eating bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, cereals, and went back to eating probably the way that my parents and grandparents had eaten. Lots of fresh food, meat and fish, fruit and veg, and full fat dairy and eggs and all those terrible things that were going to, clog up your arteries and so on. And the only fruit I had was berries. And to cut a long story short, in 3 months, I lost 13 kilograms of weight in 13 weeks without even trying. Never hungry,
Wow.
ate really well. All my metabolic issues, my blood tests went completely back to normal. I'd had this fatty liver for 10 years. I didn't really know what a fatty liver was. I'd ignored it like a typical doctor. And it went back to completely normal. And all my bloods went back to normal. I felt fantastic, and it just changed my life. So when something like that happens, you've sort of got two choices. You can either say, well, I'm all right, mate, carry on. Or you can say, geez, I'm going to tell people about this, And so really I've spent the last 10 years in various ways trying to sort of get that message out there that, hey, we might have been doing something wrong over the last 30 or 40 years, because, it's been a disaster. Ever since we went to that low fat, high sugar sort of diet, we've just got fatter and sicker. We've got, obesity rates have steadily gone up. I mean, we're now at the stage where, 2/3 of Australians are overweight or obese. It's just crazy. More than a quarter of our kids are overweight or obese. I mean, that just didn't happen in my generation, and in a space of one generation, it's completely changed, and we've just become so unhealthy. And basically, up to the main reason is diet. We're actually still exercising about the same amount we did then, and but what's changed is our diet. Now we eat processed and ultra processed food, and we stopped eating real food. It's been a disaster.
It's what makes me laugh and equally infuriates me at the same time is I think of like what you said about the politics of it all, and the more I learn on this podcast, which has been a lot, I've done over 200 episodes in just over a year, so I've spoken to a lot of people, I've learned a lot of stuff, and the more I learn, the less I know.
Yeah,
the more I learn, the less I know.
Absolutely true. Yep.
And the less I know, because all of my learnings come from human beings, and human beings are driven by different things. They all see through a different lens of experience, and they all have different drivers, and some of them don't have great drivers, So it's hard to differentiate, and it's hard, and even the technology we use to gain our information now, which is plentiful, and everyone's like, oh, how lucky are we that we've got this information? But even that is filtered for us. Before it even gets to us, it's filtered for us. If we have a conversation near our phone about something, then the information that is organically fed through our phone is to support the information that it's heard us speak about or that we've typed in. And it's like...
Scary stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I laugh because the amount of times myself or people have said in a conversation, they'll talk about something and go, it's just so rife now. Like, everyone's talking about it. It's everywhere. And I'm like, it's everywhere in your world. Of course it's everywhere in your world. The world wants it to be everywhere for you. They're selling you something. But how there's so many different philosophies around food that people have looked at now. And we are so quick to judge someone that tells us, because you might have an ulterior motive, but we'll take our shitty symptoms, our terrible mental health, our physical health, we'll take that, we'll wheel ourselves into a doctor, and we'll take whatever pharmaceuticals because we, for some reason, will trust these chemicals that go into our system that treat only the symptom.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Like, so frustrating.
Yeah, it is. It is frustrating, and the fact that the medical profession and the dietitians and so on are still so reluctant to embrace what's very clear evidence now that this high carbohydrate, high starch, high sugar diet's been a disaster, and we've got to get back to eating real food, we've stopped cooking. People don't cook anymore. It's just Uber Eats, and it's just too easy to get food, and we're time poor, we're money poor. Let's just get a frozen pizza and be done with it. And as a result, we're paying for that in other ways, and our whole society is paying for it. And the food industry has brilliantly manipulated us all. And we think bright packaging. Look at breakfast cereals. I mean, what a classic. Brilliantly marketed. I mean, for a start, we don't even need to have breakfast. The food industry is convinced us that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I mean, there's no evidence for that, but it sounds good. So, okay, now let's give you these brightly coloured packs of cereal that are basically just cereal flavoured sugars, but, little Johnny's walking through the supermarket with mum and says, Mum, I want that, and they're supposed to be full of sugar. And it's just one of many examples of the way that the food industry has brilliantly, from their point of view, marketed these highly processed food. They're not even foods. I mean, they're chemical concoctions, most of them. They've got so many. You look at the back and they've got 30 ingredients. Well, tell me what food needs 30 ingredients. I mean, it's these are just foods that are so-called foods that are manipulated to appeal to our taste buds, and the food industry has made us more and more accustomed to sweetness. So we now think that things that we used to think were sweet are now normal, and it's a new normal, and we've fallen for it completely. So 80% of processed foods have added sugar in it, and it's been a disaster. So it's really really challenging to tackle that, because you've got so many very powerful vested interests. It's very similar to the tobacco story of the previous generation. I mean, they're incredibly powerful vested interest trying to maintain the status quo. Tobacco, sugar, same thing, and the effects are equally disastrous on our health. But they don't seem to care about that.
Yeah. What's your philosophy around intermittent fasting?
I don't mind intermittent fasting. Yeah, I do it myself. I tend to sort of I only eat twice a day. Back in the day, pre this change, I'd probably have 3 meals and 3 snacks a day. Because that's what we're told. Lots of little meals, and you'd have your cereal for breakfast, and 2 hours later you'd be starving again. So you'd have something else, and so on, muesli bar or something.
Mm.
Nowadays, when you're eating food that's high in protein and good fats and so on, you're not hungry. So I eat twice a day. I eat sort of late morning. I might eat sort of, depending on what's happening, 10, 11, 12, something like that. And then I'll have dinner at sort of 6 or 7. So I'm really fasting, if you like, from 6 o'clock in the evening really till sort of midday the next day roughly. So it's an 18-hour sort of fast, and I do my exercise in the morning when I'm fasted, and that I think that works very well. I think the combination of reducing your carbohydrates and reducing the amount of, or increasing the amount of time between your meals is very beneficial to your health.
Excellent. I do that too.
Good.
Like to be reaffirmed on it.
I'll meet you for a late morning breakfast sometime.
Yes. Low
remember
carb, of course.
Remember what the word breakfast is. I mean, it's break fast. It's you're breaking your fast, and that's there's just no need to do that in the morning. First thing in the morning, you don't need to eat when you wake up. It's So, and look, if you told me this 10 years ago, I'd have laughed. I said, "Don't be ridiculous," But it's amazing how your ideas can change, and I spend a lot of time reading about diet and nutrition and so on. And the more I read, as you say, the more confusing it gets. But the more I realise that what we've been doing for all this last generation has been disastrous. And it's probably been the single biggest mistake in public health in the history of the world. It's caused more damage than anything else. The rates of obesity, the rates of type 2 diabetes, the rates of there's over 1 million Australians with type 2 diabetes. It just didn't happen in my, I mean, when I was in medical school, we called it type 2 diabetes mature onset diabetes. It was only very old people got it. Nowadays, kids get it. I mean, it's just crazy. And all these chronic diseases, all these autoimmune diseases, which we never heard of when I was at medical school. They didn't exist, Alzheimer's disease, things like that. I mean, these are largely diet and lifestyle related. And, until we get back to, the good old days of lifestyle, we're not going to get on top of these diseases, and we're going to spend more and more, of our budget on trying to treat these diseases instead of preventing them.
Yeah, I've said it before. We think we're moving forwards, but I think we're often just moving sideways. We've moved backwards in a lot of ways, and just hearing about the way that food has evolved. I mean, that's just a backward step, because look at all of the repercussions that it's given us. And instead of winding back and rectifying it, we've just stepped sideways and gone, well, how can we do something to counter all of the brokenness that's resulted in this?
Yeah, well, I've sort of tackled it in a few ways. I mean, we started a not-for-profit charity a few years ago called Sugar by Half, with the aim of reducing the amount of added sugar intake by half in Australia. And we've got some really good education programs in schools and things like that with that. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called A Fat Lot of Good, which sort of went through a lot of the history and the politics of the food, the nutrition movement, and why we've finished up in the mess that we're in, and that's been going really well. And this year we've just launched a program called Defeat Diabetes. It's an app-based program that helps people with diabetes, takes them on their journey, and shows them how we can actually put their diabetes into remission. Because basically the medical profession tells people with type 2 diabetes that it's a chronic progressive disease and there's nothing they can do about it. You've got to live with it for the rest of your life. And there's now plenty of evidence to show that reducing carbohydrate intake can actually put diabetes into remission, which is very exciting. So we've developed this app, Defeat Diabetes, and we're getting fantastic results. We've just done a survey of our first cohort, and more than 60% of them put their diabetes into remission, and they
Wow.
lost an average of 8 kilograms in 3 months and things like that. So it can be done, but you've just got to convince people to have a crack, and
Yeah.
you know, because once you've done it, you feel so good that you never go back to the old ways. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I could never go back to the way I was, you know, and putting the weight back on or feeling, you know, tired and so on. I mean, you know, you feel so much better than when you've, you know, when you've gone down this track. So that's very motivating to keep you going, because people say, oh, you know, I couldn't do that. I couldn't, you know, give up bread, or I couldn't give up, you know, pasta or something like that. And say, listen, try it. You feel so good when you do it that there's no way back.
Yeah. My philosophy is very much like I love burrowing down in the science of things, but there is science to support bloody anything you want to believe. If I wanted to go and believe that you should eat only sugar and no fat tomorrow, I'm sure I could find all the science in the world.
Yeah,
But
it's probably sponsored by the sugar industry, but it'll be there.
exactly. So my philosophy is that, and this is with, you know, everything really to a degree, is I try it and I make up my own mind. I go and I find and I talk to everyone at the highest level that I can, and then I try it and I make up my own mind. Because if we're honest with ourselves, we feel that we know the difference, we feel the difference. So I feel like a lot of people hear about something and they want to either jump on board or dismiss it straight away. So someone might be listening to you right now and go, nah, I could never do that. That wouldn't work. Or they could go, oh, this is the way. I heard it. Peter Bruckner told me. But they like try it, and then you'll know it. And once you know it, well, then you can believe. You don't believe what you hear, believe what you feel, believe what you know. I know that I really need to cut sugar out completely. I just actually did this morning another podcast, and it was very heavily on sugar from another perspective, but on sugar and our adrenal system. And the majority of my diet is pretty great. Because I don't, and like you said, like you've done with, I'd say, most of your carbs and your sugars, I don't want for a lot of things. I don't want for pizza. I don't want for chips. I don't want for, like, potato. You could put potato chips in front of me. I wouldn't care less. I wouldn't start them because I don't want them. Put a block of dark Lindt chocolate with sea salt in front of me, and I will fight you to the death. I will fight you to the death for that thing.
Yeah, well, that's different though. That's okay. You know, I mean, a little bit of dark chocolate. You know,
the whole block. It's not a little bit.
No,
it's
not the whole
bit.
block. No.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing usually most people find dark chocolate not as sort of you know, addictive as the milk chocolate. You know, you can actually.
Yeah.
I just have a couple of little squares of dark chocolate, you know, after dinner at night, and sit down with a coffee or tea or something like that, and yeah, you know, that's fine. It's just it's the other chocolates and desserts and so on. And what people don't realise, people sort of get sugar. I think, you know, most people realise that sugar is not great for you. There's two things. One, they don't realise that all the hidden sort of sources of sugar. Like sauces, like
yes.
You know, things that we've always been told are healthy, like, you know, breakfast cereals and fruit yogurts and muesli bars and so on. They're all full of sugar, and you know, barbecue sauce and things like that. I mean, it's just
my
crazy.
My favorite is, I do a lot of breakfast networking, and over the years, the amount of people I've sat next to in their little business suit, and they're like, going to be healthy. I'm going to have the Bircher muesli, and I'm like,
yeah.
Why don't you have a bowl of bloody Maltesers?
Yeah, that's right. I did that for years. I always thought, you know, muesli, it sounds healthy. It must be healthy, yeah. And but the other thing, as well as all the hidden sources of sugar, is that people don't really understand that starches are just sugars. So starches are things like, you know, potato and rice and pasta and so on. They're just basically made up of a bunch of glucose molecules stuck together. That's all they are, nothing else. And the body, when you eat a potato or a piece of bread or whatever, your body breaks down that starch into its glucose molecules. So when it absorbs into the bloodstream, it's just sugar. It's exactly the same as eating sugar. The only thing is it takes a little bit longer to get into the bloodstream than it would otherwise. But it's just sugar. And that's the secret. You know, because people, as I said, a lot of people realise Coca-Cola, and, you know, it's not great and things like that. But, you know, they'll have a loaf of bread, or, you know, they'll have a massive bowl of pasta or something. So, you know, if you want pasta, you know, just have zucchini pasta. If you want rice, have cauliflower rice. And you know, I still eat really well, you know, but I also, you know, don't do takeaway anymore. We used to have a lot of takeaway. You know, it's just easy, and, you know, you just bring up and off it come. And nowadays, I really enjoy just cooking simple meals, and
Yeah.
it's completely changed the way we eat.
Yeah. What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you definitely don't include in your diet now?
Um, well, sugar, um,
And what's the limit
starch.
on that? So some people, like sugar is in everything to a degree. Like it's in milk, it's in
Yeah. I don't mind lactose. I have a bit of milk,
yeah,
but certainly fructose. So in packaged food, less than I like to be less than five grams of sugar per 100 mils.
yep,
So for instance, a Greek yogurt's about uh,
yep.
5 grams of sugar. Of sugar.
And
That's
not at
okay.
all sweet.
Not at all sweet. No, no. So that's non-negotiable. Starches are pretty much non-negotiable, and vegetable oils. I think those seed oils are really they're inflammatory. They cause inflammation, and we now understand that inflammation is at the core of a lot of chronic disease.
Mm.
And foods, can be very inflammatory, and we need to reduce the amount of inflammation in our body. And the number of people I've had who've had inflammatory symptoms, might have arthritis or bowel issues or anything like that. You take them off all these inflammatory foods, and it completely changes them completely. Get off their
Mm.
medication, they can make a huge difference. So, yeah, vegetable oils are bad news. So I cook with butter or coconut oil or olive oil or whatever, but all those vegetable oils, when they're heated, they give off some nasty inflammatory, pro-inflammatory things. Whereas things
Coconut
like
oil?
yeah,
Coconut oil?
coconut oil's okay. Yeah, I don't mind coconut oil. People worry about it because it's high in saturated fat, but the whole saturated fat thing's grossly exaggerated anyway. And so, yeah, the I like anti-inflammatory foods. Things like oily fish and things are really good. Avocados, nuts, that sort of thing. So, yeah, if I avoid sugar, starches, and vegetable oils. I think if you can avoid those three categories, you're going to be massively improved in your health.
Mm. Mm. Do you supplement at all, or do you recommend any supplements? No.
No, nothing, not a
Beautiful.
thing. No, no. I think I mean, if you have a deficiency for some reason, but I don't see any reason. I prefer to get my nutrients from my diet. So I have a good mix of meat and fish and eggs and dairy and vegetables and nuts, and yeah, I think I get all the nutrients I need from my diet. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. How was the prior to the big C swooning in and changing our lives, the big COVID? What were your days like before that, and how's COVID changed the way you work? What are you normally out and about doing?
Yeah, look, I do a lot of work from home anyway. So my different involvements are obviously, with these nutrition campaigns that I'm involved with, Sugar by Half and Defeat Diabetes. That probably takes up a fair bit of my time, and that hasn't changed an awful lot. I used to give a lot of talks, sort of once or twice a week. I'd be giving a talk somewhere in the evening or a lunchtime group or whatever. So that hasn't happened as much. I've been doing a few talks on Zoom, but I don't enjoy it. I don't know about you, but I think you need I've discovered that I need people. I need an audience,
Yeah.
to laugh at my corny jokes and, just at least sort of, engage and so on. But I don't find it nearly, I really enjoy speaking to groups of people,
Yes.
but not as much on Zoom. So I don't do as much of that. So I still, pretty active in all the nutrition stuff. I still do a little bit of work in sports medicine. I do a day a week at one of the AFL clubs. So that's been nice to sort of be able to get out, and it's
Yeah.
regarded as an essential service. So I've continued to do that. I love the sport, obviously. I'm quite involved in community sport, so both an amateur football team and an amateur hockey team, both high level sort of amateur teams. So I really miss those involvements. I'd be going down there on Tuesday and Thursday nights to training, and Saturdays for games and things. And
Mm.
I love that sort of involvement with young people and that community spirit that the sporting clubs have. I think they play a really important role in young people's lives, giving them a sense of community. We don't have the sort of the church or the scouts or the things that we used to have, and sporting clubs and choirs and singing groups and all
Mm.
sorts of community groups just so important, I think, to give people that sense of being part of something. And so I really miss that. I love that involvement, and so I miss that part of it. But yeah, I have a university role as well at La Trobe University. We have a research centre there, a sport and exercise medicine research centre with some fantastic people who work there. So I'm still, still do quite a bit of that from home, and occasionally when we're allowed out there, I get out there. And I have a whole bunch of other sort of small business interests, some startups that I've helped out in the sort of sports science and sports medicine world, and some other family business interests and so on. So yeah, all in all, and 4 kids and a couple of grandkids, and all that sort of stuff. So life is pretty busy, pre-COVID and post-COVID. Just a bit frustrating at the moment with some of the things you can't do. But anyway, hopefully we'll get over that and get back to those community groups getting back together again are really important.
Yeah. Here's a bit of a left field question. Are you are you spiritual at all? Do you have a spiritual component? No. No.
I think I'm more of a people person than I read a lot, and on a whole variety of topics, but I wouldn't say I'm spiritual, but I like to think I care about people, and I want to, I actually have a new favourite word, and that's useful. And it sort of came out. My little grandson's a Thomas the Tank Engine fan, and they have this character in there called the Fat Controller. Now you wouldn't be allowed to call him that these days, but it's an old-fashioned sort of thing. And the Fat Controller tells Thomas that he's a very useful engine, and I think it's a great term, useful, because we really all want to feel useful. And I think that's one of the frustrations of COVID. I was talking to a friend the other day who's a doctor who's not working much because of COVID, and he can't, he's involved with his local sporting club and he can't do that. And he said, I just don't feel useful to anyone at the moment. And I think we all want to feel useful. And that's what I miss, that being able to, I feel useful at the footy club and at the hockey club and at the, and with my grandchildren and helping kids and things like that, So it's really, that's a really important philosophy, I think. I want to be, we all want to be, and we need to feel useful, because if you stop feeling useful, well, what are you here for?
Yeah. Well, I really love that. It kind of removes that kind of fluffy feel to purpose that everyone always talks. What's my purpose? But it's a real practical kind of invites everyone in to understand that concept, which is really cool. How do my listeners follow? Do you have anywhere where people could connect and follow you? Where do they buy your book, Peter?
Oh yeah, well, okay. So, A Fat Lot of Good is the name of the book. That's
I love that. What a good title, by the way.
Yeah, that's funny. Like, I wrestled with the title for about 6 months. I couldn't think of the title, and then one day it's just sort of blinding flash of light. You think, so bloody obvious. That's what the title should have been from the start. Why didn't I think of that? Thought of every other book title. I'd send it around to the family. What do you think about? Give me some names, and no one. And then as soon as of course it is. Anyway, so that's the book. It's gone really well. It's gone amazingly well. I mean, and it's just lovely when you get feedback and people write to you, and like random people just send you a message saying the book, I love your book, it's changed my life, I mean, that's cool, it's powerful stuff. So, yeah, Fat Lot of Good. So that's available, at all your favourite bookstores and Amazon and all those sort of places online. And then Defeat Diabetes, the app. There's defeatdiabetes.com.au if you want to learn more about it. But you can go onto your app store and download the app. It gives you a 14-day free trial of the app, and it's got a bunch of videos and articles and great recipes, and cooking demonstrations, because I don't think we know how to cook, and meal plans and all that sort of stuff, So, and then if you can sign up, and it literally costs $2 a week, something like that. It's like half a cup of coffee, and we're just trying to, get our money back from the money we spend on the app. Basically, it's not a money-making venture, but it's just it's such a massive. I think type 2 diabetes is the biggest single health problem in the country. With all due respect to COVID, type 2 diabetes is a lot causes a lot more problems than COVID. I mean, it's the most common cause of blindness, the most common cause of amputations, it's the common cause of heart disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, kidney disease. All these things are basically the underlying factor is type 2 diabetes. And we've shut the whole country down for a virus that's killed a few people. I'm not saying it's not important, but here's a disease that's affected a couple of million Australians and probably a couple of million more with pre-diabetes, and it's the biggest single health problem we have, and we do nothing about it. So I just decided it was time someone had to do something, and so I thought, well, let's give it a go. And I think even if you haven't got type 2 diabetes, or you're pre-diabetic, or you've got family history, I mean, it can be very helpful for people. As I said, I don't make any money out of this. We're just trying to cover our costs, which we're a long way off doing, unfortunately. But it's just something I'm passionate about, and I think you want to be useful. You want to make a difference, and I haven't got I'm getting on in life, and I haven't got that many years of useful work in me, and I want to have the biggest impact I possibly can in that time. And to me, that what I can do is if we can reduce the impact of type 2 diabetes in this society, it'll be a massive thing.
But what I also hear is, as you say that, like type 2, you've got this scale, and here we are, and then we eat terrible, and people can't see me doing my little hand actions here, but on this scale, as you start to reach, so there's no diabetes, there's excellent health, and then at the other end of the scale, there's diabetes and major health conditions. Well, there's a continuum. So if we're eating the wrong way, we might not be. Just because we haven't reached diabetes doesn't mean that there's this cascade of health and malfunction within our bodies and our minds, physically, mentally, emotionally, that's happening because of misdirected food.
Yeah, it probably takes 10 years to develop type 2 diabetes. It doesn't happen. You don't get, you might be diagnosed overnight, when your blood sugars rise, but you've become resistant to the effect of insulin over a period of 10, 15 years. So, it's not too late when you developed it, but, it'd be a lot better if you didn't develop that early on. And basically it's what you eat and how much we exercise, and if you get your diet right and do some regular exercise, then you're gonna live a long, healthy life, unless you're incredibly unlucky.
Yeah, and small changes. I think people think that they got to make a decision overnight and then change their life overnight. Like when I don't know if it was you I commented to, or the podcast this morning, about how much better my diet is than I think it is, and that's because I've never made a big change. I've gained knowledge over the last 38 years, and I've acted upon that knowledge in really small ways. So now when I eat a block of Lindt and I'm like, buddy, you've got to stop doing that. This story can be, I'm terrible with my diet, and then it's like, actually, you're probably in the top 10% really, because you really have very good practices, because you're understanding and the tiny little changes over 30 years all add up to something huge. So I think people need to be a little bit softer on themselves, but just get started with something straight away and get your app. Get Defeat Diabetes downloaded now, everyone. Come on, you've got your phone in your hand. You heard Peter.
Dear.
Look, it's been...
I think we all have a parent or a grandparent or an uncle or aunt who has type 2 diabetes, and often they're not looking after themselves because they think, oh, I'll be right, I feel okay, and so on. And so what we're finding is that it's kids, it's young people who are pushing their parents and grandparents and relatives into doing something about it, and they invariably thank them for it. But it's just getting them started is the key thing. So yeah,
it's amazing. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
So have I.
Thank you for the work you do, and it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me.